Hello, everybody. How are you doing? Happy Sunday evening. That means it's time for Futbol Miami TV weekly, 7 p.m. You know what time it is. Tonight, it's going to be a lot of fun. But of course, as always, I do not do this alone, and I do it with my buddy, my cohort, my pal, Uncle Ed. Say hi, Ed.
How's it going, guys? Thanks for joining us, man. Peter, we've got such a great guest today. We had a show before the show, unfortunately. We always do that.
Yeah, I mean, our guest is going to be Thomas Rongen. Obviously, you know that because you read the headline of the video. But yeah, we were having a great conversation with Thomas before the show, and we'll touch on some of those things that we talked about earlier, and we'll touch on it again so you guys can hear it. And as always, the chat room, we're not going to go through the chat room right now. We'll save that maybe till later because we want to get right to Thomas. We don't want him to sit in the green room too long. But those of you that are in the chat room, we appreciate you being in the chat room and jump in and pose questions in the chat room as you want. And of course, as always, I'm looking for wrong one. You could call in 786-474-4435. Leave a voicemail and we will get to the voicemail. And if it's a question for Thomas, just make it short, make it quick, and we'll get to that conversation. But before we get to Thomas and before we get to anything else, we do have to say a big thank you. And I know Thomas knows about this store. Caneswear. Go to Caneswear for all your Inter Miami gear. Caneswear's in Davie, and I know that Thomas went to Caneswear because I saw a picture of Thomas at Caneswear. So even Thomas knows that's a good place to go shopping. So go to Caneswear, the best deals in town for all your Inter Miami gear. And if you can't make it to the store, to the location in Davie, go to Caneswear.com and mention Futbol Miami TV. You might get a discount, but you might not need a discount because the prices are so good at the store. Ed, and before we go any further, if you want to get the XBTO logo sponsorship thing on any shirt you want, go there and they will do it for $10. $10, and they will put that new corporate sponsor on last year's jersey, or if you bought a jersey this year before the sponsorship, they'll take care of it for you. So $10, you're taken care of.
Awesome stuff. Peter, right before we start, let me give a shout out to Esteban Dido. Thanks for being the first person on the chat. Shout out to Jose Velasquez. Thanks, man, for joining us. I also got to mention Judge Dredd the Law. Good old Judge Dredd. Alex Z. And One World, One Goal. She's always here supporting us, and I'm sure she's excited to see that our guest is Thomas Rongen.
So let's welcome in now, this guy, I mean, he's been in South Florida for so long, and if you don't know who Thomas is, what rock are you living under, right? He's a Fort Lauderdale Strikers great. I grew up watching him as a defender for the Fort Lauderdale Strikers and also as a player coach, and I got a question about that. Oh. And then went on then to coach the Tampa Bay Mutiny in the first year of MLS. He's done a lot of things in between. He wears some really awesome and cool looking jackets on TV as a football
and those
analyst.
bow ties. He brought them back.
Bow ties. I'm a little upset that we're going to see him in a minute and he's not wearing a flashy jacket or a bow tie. I'm a little upset about that. But he also is now part of the radio broadcast for the Inter Miami. So does a lot of great color commentary. And you should do what I do. Go to the game, but listen to Thomas and Fernando Fiore on the radio broadcast. So let's not wait any longer, and let's bring in Thomas Rongen. Hey, Thomas, how you doing?
Good, Peter. Uncle Ed, what's happening? Great to be on Futbol Miami TV. And you're right, Caneswear, that's the place to go. That's pretty awesome. But they actually, for $10, put the logo on there.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty good.
Shirt sponsor.
And it's funny because I obviously I see them on social media since we're partnered with them, and I saw that you were in the store some months back, maybe a year ago, whatever it was. They took a picture with you.
Buying some swag, baby, some Inter Miami CF swag.
So even the guy that probably gets his fair share free if he wants goes and buys it at Caneswear. That's the good place to go.
That's the way I roll.
Good. And yeah, and at the same time, we want to support local business, and they're just a good local business down here. And so that's they've been in town for a long time, so that's the place to go.
Peter, before we jump into it, Thomas has been playing since the NASL days, And I kind of brought up before that he played for the LA Aztecs before. Wait, I had to mention it.
Nobody
Peter, I
cares
was born
about
in
LA Aztecs, Ed.
No,
Only you.
a little bit.
But then he moved on, of course.
As a
But-
21-year-old, the Los Angeles Aztecs, where I ended up playing with my childhood hero, Johan Cruyff, which was so special for me, obviously, as a young player growing up, emulating Ajax, total football, the 74 World Cup, obviously, that put the Netherlands on the map, so to speak. So for me to be coached by an icon, Rinus Michels, who coached Ajax, the Dutch national team, and also Barcelona, and I'm playing with Johan Cruyff was pretty special, actually, that first year. Überhaupt, the NASL was special back then.
All right, so
you're number 3 here. I know what it reflects, George Best. So,
all right, so I won't diss on LA Aztecs too much. I won't put him down too much since But you're having. I've always paid attention to you and your career, partially because of being a Fort Lauderdale Striker, and also your Dutch heritage, which we share. So, granted, you have the great Dutch accent just a little bit. You don't have that much left. You're losing it.
I hope so.
Yeah, right. You've been here for like what, 40 years or something.
42 years.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
Because here's Ed. Just so you know, Ed, people, they go to play at LA, but they stay in Fort Lauderdale.
Which is obvious, right?
3 great choices. Actually, I had 4 or 5 because I played for 5 different teams in the NASL, starting with the Los Angeles Aztecs. Then I got traded the year thereafter to the Washington Diplomats, where I got reunited with Johan Cruyff again, which was brilliant, obviously. Owned by the Whirling family in Madison Square Garden. That team folded, and I got picked up in a dispersal draft. Yeah, there was a dispersal draft back in the NASL by the Fort Lauderdale Strikers. I'm going from Hollywood to the White House to Fort Lauderdale, and eventually to Minnesota and Chicago. But yeah, I ended up in Fort Lauderdale, where I played the longest of my NASL career, where I knew the most people. And yeah, this is home away from home, so to speak. I got a Dutch passport, an American passport, and this made sense. And look at this, we've come full circle, Uncle Ed and Peter. Here we are with Inter Miami CF, and it all started
before and we
Lauderdale Strikers, obviously, initially.
Yeah, and we got some questions coming in the chat room, specifically about Inter Miami, but we'll get to that in a minute. Mm-hmm. Before we get to that, I do have a memory of when I was a child, or I don't think I was a child. I was probably a young adult at this time. I think it was probably correct me if I'm wrong, but it was probably the Winn-Dixie striker time. And as a fan, it's funny is back then, getting a sponsorship on a shirt was not the norm. So when the Strikers got Winn-Dixie on their shirt, it was kind of like ridiculed in some ways. It was teased. Like the fans, I don't know if you knew this, the fans in the stands would start chanting, "Let's go Winn-Dixie, let's go."
We were very much aware of that. And we were very much aware of the fact that we were wearing a supermarket logo, obviously. They're still around. I don't think they're ever that big, but
no,
I don't think that most of the foreign players really had a keen understanding of what Winn-Dixie was until we saw Winn-Dixie on our jerseys one day, and we went, okay, well, maybe we should shop there once in a while.
And the funny thing is, nowadays, back then it was like kind of a weird thing, but nowadays, when Inter Miami started for the first year and a half without a jersey sponsor, people are complaining, "Where's the jersey sponsor? Where's the?" But back in the Striker days, it was like, who the hell puts Winn-Dixie on their shirt?
It allowed us to stay in existence for 2 more months, in order to do that, because those were tough times, actually.
Yeah, it was.
Semi-pro. Great to be part of that, by the way, because we won a championship. Not too many people know that outside of an MLS championship I won as a coach, I also won a championship with that particular team, which was called the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, owned by Noel Lemon. And had some pretty darn good foreign and local players in that. We had Ozzy Ardiles playing there. We had Tony Miola with Arnie Mauser. We had Alvin James and the 3 amigos. I remember the Argentinians, Ricardo Alonso, Pedro Magallanes, Eric Eichmann played in that team.
Yeah, later was an assistant coach with the Miami Fusion.
Yep.
But one of my memories of watching you as a player coach, which was an unusual thing in sports. You don't see a lot of player coaches, and at one point in your career, that's what you were. And I have a memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know if this is one of those things where I just kind of thought I saw and I just lived in legend in my own brain. But I remember watching one time. Now it's the stadium wasn't full, so you could get a good seat right behind the bench, and I'd see you on the sideline as the coach, getting upset at the players, getting frustrated. They're not doing what you want, what have you. And then you just subbed yourself into the game. And me as a fan, I'm like, he's looking at this going, you guys aren't doing it right. Let me just show you how to do it.
Yeah. Worst mistake in my life, by the way, Peter. In that year, I had more muscle injuries because I was driven to be the leader at an older age.
Right.
In a very young men's sport, so to speak, fairly athletic, which MLS still is to a certain extent as well. And I remember the moment when I subbed myself in. And I also remember the moment at the end of the season where I eventually subbed myself out because I felt I needed to have a level of accountability towards my players that when I'm playing poorly, which I did in that particular game, that I also had no problems in subbing a bad player, which happened to be the head coach. And those kind of things went a long way in still being able to be respected as a teammate, which is tough, obviously, but also as a head coach. That was just such a fine line that I had to walk, and thank God I only did it for 1 year.
And I was there. It was just a weird thought to think about a player coach. It's just not something that you would ever see these days.
I tell you, I would do it again at a younger age, but rarely do you see young coaches in their early 30s become head coaches. But during my playing career, actually, because we had so much time off, I got my licenses while I was 26, 27. I got my real estate license just to stay away from boredom because we trained in the morning. So I was well prepared to take over and do that. And talking about making the changes, you can influence your team much more when you're on the field, obviously.
Sure.
On the sidelines, you become sometimes a hollow voice. So in order for me to guide people, to literally grab them and push them towards certain positions or be able to verbalize things tactically what needed to be changed, there's no better vantage point than being on the field yourself.
Right, absolutely.
And trying to remove yourself, that was the hard part for me, emotionally a little bit away from it so you could still make the right decisions for your team to succeed. And that was a hard balance because I'm a very emotional kind of guy and also kind of coach. That's how I push my players' buttons. But it was an interesting year. Yes, it certainly was, Peter. Thanks for bringing it up.
I was there. While Ed was in LA, I was there.
Good stuff. That was something we talked about earlier and with Peter, that he had to mention it. He was like, he didn't think it actually happened. He thought it was a dream or something.
I mean, I'm getting old, Ed. I'm getting old, and my memory's fading a little bit. It's not as sharp as Thomas's is. I mean, he's remembering players that he played with. I don't remember. One player I remember from the Strikers days that stands out, and actually, I know he was just at a recent Inter Miami game, and I don't remember his full name. I remembered his nickname was Chopper.
Yeah.
And he actually
Troy Edwards, Troy Chopper Edwards.
That's it. He was
center back. I had him and Johnny Clare, two local guys, one from Miami, one from the Boca Raton area, and they're both very active in youth coaching still as well.
And these
guys were.
He was just recently at an Inter Miami game because one of the old Strikers / Fusion / Inter Miami guys that we know actually ran into him. So he was taken in a Inter Miami game just recently. So let's move forward a little bit and talk about. I was reading an article recently on The Athletic about Carlos Valderamma, and he talked a little bit about his time with the Tampa Bay Rowdies and just basically how the league was back in 1996 when it first launched. Actually, he talks about he was signed to a league that didn't exist yet, and you were a coach in that first year, with a rather good Tampa Bay Rowdies. We hate Tampa Bay down here because of the Rowdies. I say Rowdies, I meant Mutiny because I got the Rowdies in my brain because of the shirt. Tampa
Sure.
Bay Mutiny is who you coached, not the Rowdies.
Yeah.
And but the Rowdies are so hated down here that name just flows off the tongue. You know,
Listen, Peter, we hated the Rowdies as players as well. That made that rivalry just so
but
special. Rodney
but
Marsh on one end,
right. But
Ray
then
Hudson,
you coached Carlos for the Tampa Bay Mutiny, and talk about those early years of MLS compared to where we are today.
Yeah, those were special moments. We all knew, obviously, that the World Cup was awarded in 1994 with, the fact that there would be a professional league established within a year or two after the World Cup. And that happened. You had some very, very interesting businessmen. They took that on. The Hunt family, the Kraft family, obviously. A small select group that went with 12 teams initially. We went back to 10 after a year or two, and then Stan Kroenke owned 5 teams, and through all of that, we're now close to 30 MLS teams. But those early years were interesting, where we're literally sat in rooms with owners that weren't that familiar with the sport, that talked about putting midgets in the goal, that talked about only one defender could be in the 18-yard box on a corner against.
Wait a minute.
Talked about making goals bigger.
We
That talked
can't-
about changing rules. Thank God for the Hunts, the Crafts, the Sunil Gulatis, the Ellen Rothenbergs, to be able to say, wait a minute, we can't screw with the beautiful game, which it's been for how many hundreds of years. So that was very interesting. You had this influence of people that want high-scoring games and wanted artificially to manufacture that, basically, whereas the Bruce Arenas, the Thomas Rongens, the Bob Bradleys that were part of the initially Ziggy Schmidts, obviously pleaded with those owners not to do that, and thank God it did not happen, with the exception of the shootout for the first few years, which actually ended up being still one of the better innovations, I think, to settle a draw, if you want to settle a draw, obviously.
A lot of people actually kind of like them.
The shootouts were nail biters. They may have been weird, but they were exciting. But wait, we can't let you go further without you. Did you say they wanted to put midgets in goal?
Smaller people, because I think an owner of the Chicago Cubs at one time, a guy that was an innovator that would burn disco albums and would have a midget one time in a real game at the plate. So that means the strike zone becomes a little smaller, obviously, for a pitcher. Pretty brilliant if you think about it. So they were thinking about, if we put smaller goalkeepers, we put a height restriction at 5'5".
That is crazy.
Wow.
That is crazy.
That's incredible.
Goals, you know?
That's the first time I've heard that. That is insane. And you know, Ed and I are big followers of the early MLS years, being the Fusion fans and stuff like that. I could put on my Fusion jersey if we want. But that I never heard of. Smaller people in the goals, a height restriction. That's crazy, because now we want the opposite. We want the tallest, the biggest, the guy that can cover the most space.
But that first year was special for many reasons, obviously. We won the Supporters' Shield. We built a pretty good team with the general manager and president, Farouk Qureshi. I had a good coaching staff. And I knew, having been in this country, how to build a solid team. And I always look at the X's first. So I started with a very good goalkeeper. My two center backs were, one played for the Canadian national team, one for the U.S. national, Clay Coleman and Frank Yallop. I had Martin Vasquez, who played for both the Mexican and the U.S. national team, as my number 6. I had Carlos Valderamma as my 10. I had Roy Lasser as my 9. And then I built around that team with younger rookies, mostly Americans. Steve Ralston comes to mind, rookie of the year. Right. Frankie Hayduk comes to mind, was my right fullback. I had Dehaney as my left fullback. I had Ivan McKinley,
was in there, right?
South African, but mostly a kid that was brought up in the U.S. system. So, and I know we're going to talk about Inter Miami, how to build teams and how to do well early on. Some historically have done well. Look at Bob Bradley with Chicago, obviously, in his years. A few great examples of first-year teams. You look at the Nashville, that's built its team almost totally opposite of what Inter Miami did. Younger, with their DPs, but also with their Americans. And then made some shrewd moves with Walker Zimmerman, which might be in the last 2 years the best move that any team made, obviously, based on Zimmerman's performances, not just with Nashville, but also with the U.S. men's national team against Mexico.
Yeah, last night he was awesome.
Game.
Right. He was great with the U.S. team.
And Valderamma was obviously the key to success for us.
All right, let's take a second here. We've got a voicemail we want to get to because I think this voicemail is going to still keep us in the past a little bit. So let's go.
All right.
Let's go to this voicemail.
Hey, Peter, Uncle Ed, and Coach Rongen. Great to see you. This is One World, One Goal. Italia from the Fusionados. The Strikers were actually before my time because, I was so young. I'm still 25, right, Ed? Anyway, me and Ed were the same age. Peter's the old guy. No, but seriously, I want to thank you for what you've done with our USA program because that is, you were training 20-year-olds, and I know you've worked with some of the academies and quite a few MLS teams. You started out with Tampa, having Valderamma, and I think you got Coach of the Year like the first year of the whole league or something. I don't know, something like that. And, of course, when we had our fusion, I think you were over at D.C., so you would have seen all the wonderful goals by Diego Serna 17 and all the great players that we have, especially the last year when we had Ray Hudson and won our greatest achievement of the Supporters' Shield. And then you made this awesome movie called Last Goal Wins, which I love that because that we always joke about that in the pickup games, and I remember scoring a lot of last goals myself in the old days. So I'd love to see what you're doing with Kaylin and Chris Whittingham and Fernando Fiore and everybody on the pre-shows. You guys do a great job. And you have those awesome pink pants, too. Okay, we love you guys. Love the show.
I don't know if there was a question in there, but definitely a lot of love coming your way.
Thank you. Coach of the Year, you talked about. I remember Ray Hudson when he took over the Fusion. I had a very good DC team that had just won the championship in '99 when I took over from Bruce Arena. And Ray came to RFK, which was a fortress for us, with Eddie Pope, Carlos Umoza, Senora, Marco Echeverri, Roy Lasser was there as well, Raul Diaz Arce, Jaime Moreno, Ben Olsen, John Harps, Richie Williams. I mean, that was a team, obviously, in '99, where I was very fortunate to win the MLS.
They were beating the Mexican teams, too, I remember back in the day.
Absolutely. We're still the only team that won a CONCACAF Champions League. Back then, it was smaller. It was 4 teams, basically, round and robin, but yeah, that's correct. In '99, I think at the end of Bruce Arena's 3 years there before he became the head coach of the national team, they did. So, but Ray came into RFK and talking about Serna 17. They kicked our butts, by the way, and that was a sobering kind of thing. And Ray brings it up once in a while when we run into each other, during the Inter Miami games. So there's this great traction between Ray and I as former players, former coaches, and now, we worked together for a while at BN Sports as well. Mm-hmm. Nice to see that we still have a relationship at age 65 now after pretty much 40 years.
Wow. Talk about relationships a little bit. Now we're moving on a little bit to the present day with Inter Miami, and you've got a pretty good relationship with Fernando Fiore as well. Maybe you can tell us a little anecdotes right there with him.
I can tell plenty of anecdotes with Fernando Fiore. At least once during a game, we talk about our travel. Fernando's traveled the world. I have traveled the world. And going back to your caller, one of my most rewarding coaching stints was with the U.S. men's under-20 national team, where I went to 3 World Cups, where I started in 2003 with the Clint Dempseys, the Eddie Johnsons of the world, the Bobby Conveys, the Chet Marshalls. Fast forward into 2007 with Michael Bradley, Josie Altador, Freddie Adu, Robbie Rogers, Sal Zizzo, pretty good team as well. So yeah, those were fun times. We're going back to you, Uncle Ed. I think that we both know that we've been at 50 plus countries throughout the world. We're just trying to figure out which countries do we have in common, and what kind of cuisine did we like in Bucharest or in Buenos Aires or in Amsterdam or in Madrid, which is always fun with Fernando. And talk about food. We always have an ability to walk away after the game with food as two single guys, basically, that can last us for 2 days. It's either pizza, sandwiches. We go everywhere, including, you know, the part where the journalists are, because there's always food and drinks in that area there. So we walk away stuffed under our arms with food for 2 days. And that's something you can ask them. What is the favorite food you like to steal from Inter Miami CF, Fernando, with Thomas Rongen?
So just by saying that, you know, we played around with the idea of being media versus just being fans. And doing this show, we could probably get media and stuff like that. We did media in the past with some of the smaller level clubs. And I've always said, I'd rather just sit in the fans. It's more fun. But now you mentioned the food. Now you got me intrigued. That maybe I should say, forget it, Ed. I don't want to sit next to you. I'd rather go sit next to.
Now it's not as good as the VIP area.
Right.
I crash at halftime pretty regularly as well, and have to bring back a hot dog for Fernando Fiore. You know, I mean, so yeah, we good time and fun to be involved with this project of Inter Miami, not only now but hopefully going forward.
Yeah, so let's talk about that some more. I mean, you know, obviously the first 2 seasons did not go as planned. We thought this club was going to come in and they kind of came in with a lot of bravado, saying we're going to kind of like teach the league about football. You know, they know soccer. We're going to show them what football is all about. And it didn't quite go the way I guess is planned. And now, well, just give me your thoughts on what you saw in this last year with football, with Inter Miami, and you know the positives and the negatives that you saw.
Yeah, you can't disconnect the 2 years, quite frankly, because you lay a foundation early on for either success or failure, and I think this team wasn't built right. Just in a synopsis about the first year, be it their DPs, be it their foreign players not doing well in the draft, cost you as well, as Daryl DK shows, quite frankly. So you're behind the 8 ball from the start, and then to try to make changes after this second year due to financial constraints, due to age, due to chemistry or lack therefore. We all know who we're talking about. A lack of youth, lack of speed. So it's just some of the buzzwords I'm using right now to look at this year and see where Miami fell short. They tried some different systems. You could say that in the last game, they found some resolve against the best team in the league, the New England Revolution, without Higuain. Best performance of Pizarro. Dogmatic defensively, starting out of a 3-5-2 or 5-3-2, and eventually became a 5-4-1 when they try to lock down and win a game ugly, which teams need to do in any league in the world. But what does that mean going forward? I think only Phil Neville, the owners, and obviously Chris Henderson will be able to determine that. So there's a lot of things that need to get better. You look at the lack of scoring. You look at the league where we are in the lower half or towards the bottom. We're giving up a lot of goals, so we need to tighten things up. Lack of discipline, yellow and red cards. That reflects an environment that can be prevented, as the last game showed. That a great deal of concentration and discipline in the tactical phase, but also the mental phase of the game. Do we need to get technically better? Yes, I think so. Do we need to find another striker? Without a doubt. Is Pizarro your number 10, or is he not? I doubt it. Can you use Pizarro to get something back from Mexico in terms of finances, so you can cut your losses a little bit? Do you buy out guaranteed contracts, which you have to do if you're talking about Matuidi and Higuain? So those are tough. Do you maybe have to use one of your better players as a pawn to extract something from another team to get better in an area where you want to get better? We know that LGP at one point in time was approached. We know that Lewis Morgan is a guy that somebody else might want and is willing to give up a player some money that, obviously Inter Miami needs to use in order for them to bring in better players domestically and from abroad. And then philosophically, what is your direction? What's your playing style? Are we a pressing team? Which we obviously showed we can, because teams play through our press quite easily. Did we struggle against younger pressing teams? Yes, we did, because we weren't able to really consistently play through that pressure as well. So I'm sure that each and every day in this off season, the brass will try to turn this thing around, which is, I'm telling you, is not an easy thing to do, because I've been there and done that. I've done that well once with the Tampa Bay Mutiny. I did it poorly with Chivas USA, where I was the first coach, and also needed to put an expansion team together. And I felt that we, because of technical abilities only of the Mexican players, that team was predominantly Mexican, could survive in MLS. And I got fired after 10 games. So you learn lessons along the way, and I think that Inter Miami has to make some really tough decisions on what players to remove and what players to bring in, and what kind of players are those. Again, do we need a wide player? We need speed in all three lines. I think that is very glaring. Do we need somebody that can shoulder the burden of assists for Morgan, who, by the way, had a very good first year and tapered off a little bit in his second year, but I think that's due to the fact that the team as a whole didn't function very well, and Morgan took MLS a little bit by surprise, so to speak. Gregory is a mainstay. Can you carry LGP, Figal, and Sawgrass financially? Probably not. One needs to go, maybe even two. Does Mabika, a guy that you say, hey, he could be a starter for us, or he could give us 20 or 22 games? Are we good enough at fullback? Leerdam and Jovan Jones, who was injured a lot, obviously. Is Brett Shea still an option there, or is he higher up the pitch? We know of some guys that on Twitter have said goodbye already,
right?
McCarthy and Chapman.
Right.
And Pizarro, till a certain point, is taking his fight towards Higuain right now, which I don't think is...
Liking all the negative Higuain posts. I mean, what do you read into that?
That's probably not very smart in order to do that. So
not the way to go out.
I know that the Inter Miami brass is aware of not great chemistry between a few players, obviously, so you got to gut something out.
All right, so we only have a few more minutes with you. We want to be respectful of your time. There's a bunch of questions in the chat, but that are going back to the Strikers days. But we'll handle one of those. And just before we get to that, I do want to ask you a question about, with the sanctions that the club has to deal with, $2 million less to work with. I mean, we have to. I don't think you have a choice but to focus on the academy. So I don't know how much you've paid attention to the academy or what, but I'm curious, what do you think of what maybe you've seen with the Fort Lauderdale squad or some of the academy kids? Are there any gems there that are ready to move up next year in a situation where we're financially strapped? We need to use them.
If you talk about the academy, yes, there are some gems there. Is anybody in the academy at
ready?
16, 17, 18 ready to make the leap and become an important player? Probably not. But the reality is, if you look at all the MLS teams, early on we didn't have academies, but it takes 5 to 7 years to start producing some very good homegrown players. And then you see teams consistently every year being able to move one or two guys up, sell one or two guys. Dallas is a great example, obviously.
Sure. Oh, they have a great academy.
With Pepe again, but have done so well with other teams. You look at Aronson right now, you look at Caden Clark, you look at all these guys that came through MLS academies, but established MLS academies that have been around for 28 years already. So for us to expect somebody to come in and erect this academy and get dividends after 2 years is not easy. It's not. The Fort Lauderdale team I've seen a few times. There's 3 or 4 players there that are very solid and that could potentially give you a starter somewhere, be it, I know it's Phil Neville's son, but I'm telling you, he's not a bad player.
No, he looked good. I watched all the Fort Lauderdale games.
If you say at a right back or as a number 6, with all due respect to Matuidi, but if you put Neville's son next to Gregory, I feel already more comfortable, quite frankly. And that is not a statement towards Matuidi, but more a statement towards Phil Neville's son, obviously. We talked about Mabika already. They got a few guys on top. Ascona's faded a little bit away, but they got some guys on top that I don't think are ready to play 34 games as starters and produce, but will give you some more depth on the bench that you can utilize later. But I think the most important for this team is you need to find 11 good starters, and you cannot make any more mistakes with an academy player or with an American player, with a college player, a rookie, with a youth DP, with a other DP, if that's the need. You need to hit home runs every time because of the situation you guys just talked about, the sanctions,
right?
et cetera.
But how realistic is that with the sanctions? How realistic is it to hit on all those things with the current sanctions?
Very hard.
Right.
Saying that, and Chris Henderson made a great point. The Kansas City Wizards in '99 were one of the worst teams in MLS.
Right.
In 2000, and Chris was part of that team, Kansas City made some changes, 4 or 5 very important changes. All those players became very important players. They won the MLS Cup. So it's possible, but very, very hard to do, in particular because of the sanctions right now against Inter Miami. And as I said again, not having done well in the draft, so that's important again. You got to look at Bruce Arena. They're outside of his. New England is a great example. 3 big-time DPs that if you look at the numbers, you go, all right, these guys have produced.
Yeah.
And basically a bunch of American guys that work their socks off, that understand the system, that have a passion for the game as well, which lacked at certain games I felt. And to me, that's the secret to success. Build a good access with DPs that are, and you look at their DPs, they're all under 30 as well. You look at Nashville's DPs, they're all under 30 as well and producing, obviously. So we've gone the other way in our first year and are paying the price for that in our second year, and hopefully not too much in our third or fourth year. But I don't think we'll jump from the position we're in into fourth or third or second in the East. Can we compete for a playoff position with some shrewd moves, which I still think I'm a big believer in Chris Henderson and Phil Neville to a certain extent as well. Yes, we can. We can be competitive and we can fight for that 5, 6, 7 position. I think that's realistic for our fans and realistic for this club.
All right. Hey, before we let you go, I do want to let you answer one of these questions. B. King is asking in the chat room, ask Thomas how underrated Jan van Beveren was as a great keeper for the Strikers and a super classy guy. So how underrated he was.
Yeah, rest in peace, Jan. One of the greatest. I know when we talk about the Striker history, a lot of people talk about Banks. Banks was one of the best in the world. Jan van Beveren was one of the best in the world that not too many people knew about. He had 2 opportunities to represent the Netherlands in the World Cup, and due to a friction between him and he played for PSV Eindhoven and Ajax, and particularly Johan Cruyff, who banged heads, Jan van Beveren did not appear in the 74 and 78 World Cup. Being by far the best goalkeeper in the Netherlands, and ultimately forced them, due to criticism of the public, to come to the United States, to flee basically. A real sad story of one of the greatest, and Ray Hudson speaks volumes about Jan van Beveren, one of the greatest, classiest, best goalkeepers ever that not too many people knew about, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. Well, we want to, thank you so much for spending some time with us. It was amazing. We could talk to you for another 2-3 hours. Always fun. And one of the coolest things I think that maybe people don't realize is just how much of a fan of the fans you are. I mean, I remember at the last incarnation of the Strikers, which was not the best. We had some terrible ownership, but I would see you occasionally at the games, and you were always stopping by to take pictures with the fans. You stopped at the beginning of this year. Some of the Southern Legion guys were out, and you stopped for a photo with them and kind of like photobombed. You pulled your car over real quick, jumped out, and how much we appreciate you and being so classy with the fans and everything, and are always fun to listen to on the broadcast. Inter Miami broadcast, and also whatever you may do with beIN Sports. Just keep wearing those cool bow ties and jackets.
I will. Sorry, guys. It's like a Sunday night chill kind of day for me today. So
I'm there with you.
I thought about it, but I went like, nah.
Nah, it's just some silly podcast with a couple goofy guys.
MLS.
There you go.
MLS Cup. There you go. 99.
There you go.
I'm not wearing my ring though, but it's all good. It's all good. And you guys do a great job as well. Uncle Ed, as the vice president of one of our greater supporters groups as well. We love those guys. We love all of them, obviously. We want them to come back. You've suffered. We all have suffered, including myself. Calling the games is hard sometimes because of the fact that we care so much as well. But we also have to be critical of the process and have made some mistakes and that need to be called out and that need to be changed, obviously, which I hope going forward they will and can give our fan base something to dream about in the next few months.
Yeah, and you keep doing that on the broadcast. You keep holding their feet to the fire and keep them accountable. We love listening to that, and we'll keep doing that here on the show. I mean, Ed and I, we go back from the Strikers or Aztecs in his case, so the Fusion, losing the Fusion, and we're just happy that we have our team. So, but it's time for them to. It's time to get some results. So thanks so much, Thomas, and
Thomas.
We really appreciate you spending some time with us, and we
Awesome.
we look forward to doing this again sometime in the future.
Good luck.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good.
All right, Ed, that was
Rongen.
awesome. Yeah, Thomas Rongen there.
I just wanted him to keep talking, man. That's why I was just quiet. I was like, let him do his thing. Let him, tell us his stories, and we could have kept on going. Just
so the chat knows and people watching this later, he had a hard stop. So he's got some business he needs to take care of. So we wanted to make sure we were respectful of that. So we've got the next so many minutes to just shoot the, whatever with each other and talk about what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I have so many memories of Thomas. Like I said, it was always, you don't ask Thomas to join a photo. He just jumps in. And just because, like, I remember one time I was at a Strikers game and I was wearing this shirt. Like, I'm wearing a retro Strikers shirt. And he loved it. So he jumped in to get a picture with us. And that time that I mentioned with the Southern Legion, we were outside the stadium. And he pulled his car over. And meanwhile, the security guy's going, hey, you can't park there. And he jumped out real quick in his, like One World, One Goal said, in his pink pants and took a quick picture with us and everything. Just always so good with the fans.
He's such a down-to-earth person. And, as you guys could see, we actually had a show before the show. We were just talking and laughing about, everything that, he's so knowledgeable in the sport and has had so much experience that, how can you not talk to this guy? We could have kept on going.
Yeah. And like I said, we had the show before the show, which sometimes is better. We try not to talk much but you can't help it. He's logged in 10 minutes before the show. We got to talk. It's awkward if you don't. And, so it's just the stuff that he did, he's like I said, Ed, people may go to LA, but they stay here in South Florida. They stay here.
I did.
Right. And Ray Hudson, I mean, look, he, another striker, great. And with Inter Miami as well in some capacity, calling the games. Played for Fort Lauderdale Strikers and never left. And we had him on one of our old shows, on our Blog Talk radio shows, Ultras Live, where he said something about Fort Lauderdale was
the Venice.
The Venice. That was it.
The Venice.
Right. He called it the Venice and of the United States. And so why would you leave here? Right. So why would you leave this place? So yeah.
All the hot ladies, and he went on with a little bit more that I'm not going to say, but it was awesome.
Yeah, it was good. I think I've pulled a few sound bites from that over the years, but Thomas Rongen's one of those guys you could talk to for hours and hours and hours. Besides all the stuff that he's done with all the teams that he coached that we did not talk about, but because we just wanted to focus on the things that maybe were relevant to us. But Ed, speaking of some of what happened with Inter Miami is and Thomas Rongen touched on it. We have 2 players that have now officially left the club.
We sure
Not
do,
officially,
Peter.
but their Twitter is official enough, right?
That basically says they went through the process of talking to the team. The team basically probably, we know there were exit interviews and stuff like
Sure.
that. We know of 2, perhaps 3 that,
Right.
that have already said something.
And last week we went into great detail about the players that their contracts were expiring in December. And 2 of those players, being John McCarthy and Jay Chapman, are the 2 players we're talking about. John McCarthy did not get his renewed, and I get it, because I think at this point, one of the Fort Lauderdale keepers can move up, right? We've got Drake Callender, who maybe is good enough to now at this point to be backup and come in when necessary, and hopefully there's not a big drop off or anything like that. But Chapman is the one I was more surprised with, Ed. I thought Jay Chapman had a solid year with us. Maybe some people complained about him in the beginning of the year. I'm not going to call anybody out, but Uncle Ned may have had a problem with Jay Chapman. Not to name any names. I don't like to throw people under the bus like Uncle Ned, but I think some people had problems with Jay Chapman. I never did. I thought he was a solid performer. You could count on him when he came in, and they let him go. I was kind of surprised by that. I thought they might renew his contract, but then again, his contract did expire. He's gonna want more money, and what do you think about that?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. He probably wanted more money, or something must have come up. I would have kept him if he was still cheap. I think you had told me he wasn't making too much money. I'm sure he asked for more.
I'm looking him up right now.
And I think that probably had something to do with it, Peter.
His base salary was $167,500, but overall compensation with TAM money or whatever, however the MLS finds creative ways to pay players, bonuses and things like that. He made total compensation was $180,333. So a little over $180,000. If he's renewing his contract, he probably wants at least $200, maybe even more, because $250 or something like that. And I guess Inter Miami might look at that as just a little too rich for their blood. But I don't know. I think he was solid.
I think if anything, he would have been a good backup. And while we're on the subject of players that are going to be gone, you already mentioned McCarthy. He's on his way out, but there's also Kelvin Leerdam, who's also a free agent right now.
Yeah,
I think we spoke about him as well.
Did.
I'm okay with him going. I think he made some mistakes. And,
I think Leerdam, his time has come. He was okay, but
and one of your favorites.
He's not cheap
Peter.
either.
Oh, how much was he?
Kevin Leerdam with guarantee. Okay. His base salary was only $180,000, not too bad, but his total compensation was close to $300,000.
Oh, yeah, and he was probably asking for more money, and they probably said, "Hey, man, but you kind of make some mistakes there."
But we don't know that he's officially gone yet. Did he make any kind of Twitter comments yet?
No, nothing at all. But I think he's probably one of the guys that I would, personally let go,
right?
Because of the mistakes that he made, and he was somewhat solid with Seattle. I think it was his team before. Yep. But I just don't think he did that well with us. He's available. Maybe somebody else will pick him up. But there's one of your favorites, Peter. Victor Ulloa is also a free agent.
Yeah.
What do you think about keeping him, and how much money does he make?
Well,
that's what we're concerned about.
I think Ulloa is too expensive. I think you let him go. Ulloa is okay. So he's a free agent. He's making $220. Not incredibly high, but remember, we got hit. So
we got to cut those edges wherever we can.
And the interesting thing is, I was thinking, that we would lean on the academy to some extent, maybe bring somebody up, even if it's just for depth, right? Even if it's just for depth, but based on what Thomas Rongen was saying, is nobody there yet is quite ready in the academy.
Wow.
And interesting thing, Ed, I just remembered yesterday. So this weekend for me, Ed, was very busy. It was a dance weekend. My daughter was doing several 3 shows this weekend.
Oh, I thought you were going to be dancing.
No. You don't want to see that.
You like to do? No,
you don't want to see me dancing. But my daughter was dancing, and she did 3 shows. Being a good parent, went to all 3 shows. And
that's good.
In the middle of on Saturday, there was a 1:30 show and a 7:30 show. So you know what's close to her school is Fuzzy's Tacos, and I think did I ever take you to Fuzzy's Tacos, Ed?
I think we went with Julio Caballero one time.
I think we went one time. It's a good place, close to Lockhart Stadium, close to Drive Pink Stadium. It's a good taco place. I shouldn't be giving away any secrets, right? Because after the game, if it's an early enough game, because I think they close around 10. If it's an early enough game, go get yourself some Fuzzy Tacos. They've got a Inter Miami flag up there. They don't sponsor us, but they should. But there was there was an academy.
Free tacos.
I went there to get tacos with my wife because that's one of her favorite places. And there was an academy kid and his family at the at Fuzzy's Tacos. I didn't talk to him. I didn't want to bother him, but he's of driving age because his dad made him drive. He didn't want to drive, but he handed him the keys and he's like, he made him drive. Like, hey, go get practice. Like what I need to do with my daughter. She needs some practice. But there was an academy kid. And you knew he was an academy kid because it said MLS Next on his side of his shirt, on his gray training jersey. It looked like.
Yeah.
So saw one of the Inter Miami Academy kids. Could be a future star, but not quite yet, according to Thomas Rongen. Yeah,
and well, he didn't mention any player from Fort Lauderdale CF. I mean, he mentioned
other than Neville's son Harry or Harvey
and Mainka, I believe, who was a defender.
Mabika. But Mabika, we all saw. Right. We saw him get some time with the first team whenever we needed an extra defender because of the hard times ruleship. So they brought him up. So we all got to see Mabika a little bit. And look, he's starting next year, or he's on the team next year. I don't know if he's starting or not, but he's definitely on the team next year.
I was going to say that. I think he's one of the guys that's going to make the step up. But Peter, I wanted to bring up, I don't know if you've got something else, but I wanted to bring up a little bit about the free agents that are available.
Okay, let's go through it.
Talk about that for a little bit. So I was looking through the list, and there's a couple of guys that we're kind of familiar with because they're South Florida guys. Now, you tell me if they're expensive or they're not expensive. But we've got one of my favorites, Alejandro Bedoya. He used to be with the U.S. national team.
Too expensive.
He's always been straight up. He's expensive. He's played with Philadelphia.
$1 million
playmaker.
Guaranteed compensation. $1 million.
Ooh,
not gonna happen.
Yeah, and that kind of sucks because he's a local guy.
It'd be fun to bring him home. I think he played his club's youth club in Weston, right?
Yep. Yeah, that's why I mentioned Weston. He's from there, and I was just like, maybe we can bring this guy back, but you're saying it's too much money.
Too much. It's not happening unless he's at the end of his career and he's saying I'll take a hit. But he's not. I don't think he's there yet.
Yeah, I think he's still got a couple more years before he can say I'll take a hit because I want to go and retire back home at Weston or whatever.
Right.
So yeah, I think he's off our. With the money that you're talking about, I don't think he's going to be one of the players that we're going to bring over.
Nope.
But there is Fafa Picault. What's your thoughts on him?
Love Fafa. So those of you that aren't Strikers fans may not remember him. He's part of the older, more recent generation of the Strikers. And it's funny that I remember Fafa because back in the time we had the coach at this time was Gunter Kronsteiner. Remember Gunter?
Good old Gunter.
Gunter was awesome.
Love the guy.
Austrian, older Austrian guy. Great with
he
the fans.
He talked like Arnold.
Yeah.
Remember?
I'll be back. But he didn't come back. He would tell me, I had we had Gunter on our old show a few times, and it was a great guy. But he would talk about Fafa, and he said Fafa's problem was that Fafa, while he was with the Strikers, was always talking to Gunter as far as what team in Europe can you get me, connected with. His dreams were over here, but in his playing wasn't focused on his here and now. And so Gunter was always trying to get him to stay focused on his here and now. But he got past that and eventually made it into MLS, and he's done well in MLS. He's I think a bit of a journeyman. He's played on a few teams in MLS, but speedy young guy. I think he's Haitian, if I remember correctly. So nice local connections, but again, might be too expensive at $500,000.
$500,000,
which is what he was currently making with his last team in Houston. Now, here's the thing: Houston sucked, and he was part of a sucky team. So maybe you get him for a little bit less. I don't know. I don't know how that works. With these players, if he's on a bad team, so does his dollar value go down? Because he's part of the suckiness, right? So, but he was a speedy. Imagine him playing next to Higuain. Higuain can be slow and all he wants to do, and Fafa comes up speeding. He's real fast and crafty and everything.
Fafa's a fast guy.
Fafa was fun to watch.
And I remember a lot of the chants we had for him back in the day were pretty fun because Fafa, you could basically sing anything to Fafa.
Can you?
Like
give me an example, Ed. I want to hear you sing.
Fa 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 fa. Huh? What do you think about that?
I like that. Give me another one. Give me another one.
There were more, but I can't remember them right now. That's the first one that came to my mind right now. But it's easy to sing to.
Yeah.
It might be a match made in heaven, man. Yeah. I'm sure he'll want to come back.
Yeah, I think it would be great, but again, it goes back to money. Yeah, where are we at? I mean,
it's all about the dinero.
We're strapped. I mean,
so those are two of the players that I thought maybe, they've got South Florida connections. Maybe we can, somehow maneuver that. But there's, here's a guy, but he's old. Bradley Wright Phillips. Yeah. He was goal scorer. He's old though.
Yeah, and he's good. I think he's been more recently coming off the bench. And so he's too expensive to come off the bench for us, for our current situation. No.
Well, let's look up Andy Nahar, for example. He's another journeyman that you were talking about. He's a defender right now. We need our defenders because I think we're going to lose.
Wow.
Our big defenders. I think we're going to lose them.
And I know that name. I'm surprised. What is he? A center, left, right? I don't remember.
I know he's a defender. I think he's originally Honduran. I'm sorry if he's not Honduran, but I think he was Honduran or Guatemalan.
All right.
And he pretty good for a while, so he came to mind.
I don't know if he's still any good, but because based off his salary, I would think he's not. I'd have to look up his stats.
How much?
I don't know if you want to look up his stats or not, but his base salary is only $90,000. That is a player. If he still can play, I'd have to look at his most recent stats. I haven't really followed him.
I remember back in the day he was pretty decent.
Back in the day, but has he
played for his
fallen
national
off?
Team?
Right. Has he fallen off too much? Because he is a bargain. I mean, guaranteed compensation was $100,000. So still, that is a bargain. Kata is saying
affordable.
Kata, if he's
affordable guy.
If he's referring to what we're talking about, Kata is saying right back, right wing. So somewhere on the right.
Oh, here's another journeyman who's been around for a while. Jonathan Bornstein. He was with Chicago. He's another defender. Not sure if he's he used to play well. These are just guys that I'm remembering from a little while ago that played pretty decently. There's a couple more, but I don't know if you remember if it says how much his
Who's
compensation
that? I'm sorry.
was.
I'm sorry. I got
Jonathan. Bornstein.
Okay, I'll look it up. I got tied up here looking at the chat, and there's a conversation in the chat that I don't know where it came from, but talking about the Moss brothers and whether they're good for the team or not good for the team. So I don't know where that started or not, but there's a conversation in the chat going on about whether or not the Moss brothers are good for the team. Hey, if it wasn't for the Moss brothers right now, there would not be a team because
there would not be a team.
The project was about to end. It was hours away from pulling the plug. Beckham and Clore were almost done, and the Moss brothers came in. So, yes, they are very hands-on, or at least Jorge is very hands-on. But I'd take it. I don't care. Who did you want me to look up, Ed?
I'm okay with Jonathan Bornstein. He was Chicago Fire. I am happy with the Moss brothers. I mean, they've at least Jorge has become so dedicated to this team. And yes, he may have made mistakes, maybe listening to the wrong people, but in the long run, I think he's been a good owner. Yes, he had, like I said, listened maybe to the wrong people, but I think he's learned his lesson now. I think we're on the right path, and we're gonna find out soon.
Yeah, we'll find out. You can't call it a failure with him yet. It's he hired people. Did he make a bad hire? Sure, but we all do that. Look, in my career, I hire people. I've made some good hires, and I've made some bad hires. It's just the way it is, and so I can't crush the guy. Now he is a little bit of a Jerry Jones, very, very hands-on, maybe sometimes too much. But I'd rather have an owner that cares and is hands-on than one that is like Stan Kroenke that doesn't care and is super cheap.
Right.
Just saying. Your Jonathan Bornstein is making $300,000. So
$300,000.
Still maybe too old because too much. He's up there in age as well, right?
Yeah, he's up there in age. He played for the national team a couple times. He's got some experience back there. I'm just thinking about players that may be able to make at least be decent backups if they're not going to be starters. And I think he would probably be a backup. But for a backup to be that expensive, I'm not sure he's that good enough.
All right, Ed.
Yeah, one of the guys that's up here that's a midfielder is Jonathan Dos Santos. I'm not going to even tell you to look that up because it's not going to happen, but I just wanted to mention it, that he's available. And Sasha, well, that's another guy.
Jonathan Dos Santos. Jonathan Dos Santos makes $2 million.
Forget
$2 million.
No, forget that. No.
I just had to look it up. I had to look it up since you told me not to. I had to.
Yeah, and the Breck Shea is also on that list. We need to bring that guy back. Yes. He just covers so many positions on the left side that how could you not bring him back?
And just as such a good quality locker room guy, as Phil Neville said, he is the only guy on the team really that gives him no headaches. He's just like, whatever you want me to do, coach. Yep, okay. Whatever you want me to
cover that spot, sure. And he usually covers any spot on the left-hand side perfectly, so I am okay with this guy. He can, you get an injury that you weren't expecting, and he'll cover that spot. So, which one did I mention just a second ago? Sasha.
He's expensive too. I mean, but he's at the end of his career. Oh, wait, he doesn't even come up. Sasha. Where is he? There he is. Oh, I spelled Sasha wrong. He's cheaper than I thought. $247,000 and change.
Yeah, he's got a lot of experience, but he's a midfielder. I don't know.
Does he still have that killer mustache?
I'm not sure, man. He might. He's one of those guys that has different looks, kind of like Breck Shea. He's got that mullet thing going.
Yeah. He had a great mustache.
Kind of reminds me of Peter Brown back in the day. But you didn't have a mullet, did you?
I didn't have a mullet. I had a full-on, hair, man.
You looked like a lion or something, back.
All right. Well,
back in the day,
people are wanting us to look up some other players. Noah Allen, for example, One World, One Goal wants us to look up Noah Allen on Fort Lauderdale. We'll have to get to that kind of stuff. We have to fill several shows in the off season, so we can definitely focus on players like Noah Allen, who's up for USL League One Player of the Year award. So congratulations to him. But we can focus on some of these other players in a future show because we definitely have some shows to fill some stuff in this silly season, this off season, which luckily is pretty short this year. So, and Kata is asking, is there a show next week? Yes. And we'll talk about people like Noah Allen and things like that next week.
And we can talk to them with our good friend Fernando Fiore, who will be our guest next week. So, got any questions for? Yeah, you got any questions for Fernando Fiore? Get them ready because he's an old friend of the show since back when we just did the Blog Talk Radio.
Well, even one of our first videos, not the first, but one of our early videos is you going to his house, doing kind of like an MTV Cribs. We had this idea of doing this Cribs thing. We did one. That's it. We only did one.
I called up a couple of people, and
people don't want you in their house, Ed.
They don't want you in their house, man.
No, they don't want you in their house.
I don't want to mention the people that I called up, but they were just like, no, I don't think I'm comfortable with people seeing the inside. But Fernando, he didn't care. That's what I love about Fernando.
Showed us all.
He's like, sure, come to my house, Uncle Ed.
Showed us all his soccer jerseys, and go to FMTV and look up Fiore, and you'll find it within our videos.
Yes. What was it? FMTV Cribs?
Yeah, FMTV Cribs. We called it.
And Peter did this cool animation and everything.
Yeah.
I wish we had it, man. We can
put it up. I still got the animation. I was like, we get you.
We're gonna.
You break into some other person's house, and we'll use the animation.
I'll try. I'll try, man. We'll at least do one a year at least.
Maybe.
How's that time?
Maybe. Well, we didn't do one this year, so you're already failing.
All
right, so Fernando Fiore next week to answer your question about whether or not there's a show. Yes, and we're filling the off season with some fun guests. So stay tuned next week when we talk to Fernando. So hey everybody, thanks so much. I'm trying to find where my mouse is so I can click on the outro. Thanks so much everybody for those of you in the chat. You guys were a lot of fun. Thank you so much for Thomas Rongen for spending some time with us. He was an amazing guest, and he liked our production value, Ed. So that's good.
I'm surprised.
How about that? So anyways, please like, share, and subscribe this video. Tell your friends. If you tune in and watch this, tell people. Let's make this thing grow a little bit more. And make sure you go to Caneswear. Even Thomas Rongen knows that is the place in town to shop for Inter Miami gear.
Do it.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We will talk to you next week.